Ya, setelah terakhir kita sudah membahas tentang dynamical matter field yang terkoppel dengan gauge field. Sekarang kita akan bahas tentang 't Hooft and Polyakov monopoles. Ini adalah chapter yang terakhir, subsection terakhir sebelum cerita di further reading di bab gauge field ini. Coupling dynamical electrically charged particle to Young-Wells theory is straightforward.
Itu bacanya gimana sih?
Apa? 't Hooft.
Oh, at house. Oh, ya, sip.
't Hooft-Polyakov monopoles. Coupling dynamical electrically charged particle to Young-Wells theory is straightforward, although understanding their dynamics may not be. But what about dynamical magnetically charged particle? Nah, sekarang apa yang bagaimana dengan dinamika dari magnetically charged particle? For abelian gauge theory, this isn't possible. If you want to include Dirac monopoles in your theory, then you have to put them by hand. Jadi kalau kita mau meninjau Dirac monopole di abelian teori, maka kita harus menambahkannya by hand. But for non-abelian gauge theories, it is a wonderful and remarkable fact that with the right matter content, magnetic monopoles come along for free. There are soliton in the theory. Nah, tetapi kalau untuk non-abelian gauge theory, kalau kita memilih meter yang tepat, maka magnetic monopole bisa kita dapatkan secara free. Atau dalam kata lain, magnetic monopolnya itu adalah soliton di teori kita. Magnetic monopoles appears whenever we have a non-abelian gauge theory broken to its Cartan subalgebra by an adjoint Higgs field. Jadi magnetic monopole itu ada ketika kita mempunyai non-abelian gauge theory broken to its Cartan subalgebra by an adjoint Higgs field. Kalau kita punya non-abelian gauge theory dan dia broken ke Cartan subalgebranya karena adjoint Higgs field. The simplest example is SU2 gauge theory coupled to a single adjoint scalar phi. As explained previously, yang tadi ya, yang ini ya, SU2 with an adjoint scalar. As explained previously, we use the convention in which phi sits in the Lie algebra. So phi sama dengan phi A dA ya, karena dia tadi adjoint. For G equal SU2, the generators A dA equal sigma A over 2 with sigma A the Pauli matrices. Kalau untuk SU2 generatornya ya Pauli matris seperti biasa ya. We take the action to B dan aksinya ini. Ini cuman gauge teorinya terkoppel dengan phi, adjoint phi-nya aja. Note that we have rescaled the scalar so that it too has 1 over G square sitting in front of it. Ini ya. Jadi kita rescale scalarnya sehingga ada faktor 1 over G square di depannya. The potential is positive definite. The vacuum of the theory has constant expectation value phi. Up to gauge transformation we can take kita bisa mengambil expectation value dari phi-nya itu adalah setengah itu ya, phi minus phi di diagonalnya. This breaks the gauge group SU2 to U1. The spectrum consists of a massless photon, which in this case sits in the T cube part, not T cube, T3 part of the gauge group. Ini generatornya ya. Together with massive W boson and a massive scalar. There are, however, more interesting possibilities for the expectation value. Any finite energy expectation must approach a configuration with vanishing potential at spatial infinity. Such configurations obey trace phi square to v square when x approaching infinity. Selain yang tadi, ada juga kemungkinan lain dari expectation value yang bisa ngebrok gauge groupnya. Any finite energy excitation must approach a configuration with vanishing potential at spatial infinity. Sembarang energy excitation yang finite harus menuju konfigurasi dengan potensial yang lenyap ketika spatial infinity. Atau ini ya maksudnya ya, trace phi square-nya itu menuju v square ketika x-nya itu ketika spasialnya infinity. Decomposing the Higgs field into generator of Lie algebra, phi-nya tadi phi ATA dengan A1, 2, 3. The requirement that the potential vanishes defines a sphere in field space. Syarat agar potensialnya itu lenyap itu mendefinisikan sebuah bola di field space-nya. Ya, jadi karena kita harus punya ini trace phi square-nya itu menuju v ketika x-nya menuju infinite, maka phi-nya itu ya ini phi A ini trace-nya ya, berarti trace-nya phi A. Ya walaupun kadang ada faktor setengah atau apa, kadang sama dengan v square. We see that for any finite energy configuration, we must specify a map which tell us the behavior of the Higgs field asymptotically. Nah, kita harus menspesify sebuah pemetaan yang memberitahu kita bagaimana perilaku Higgs field secara asymptotik, yaitu S2 infinite to S2. The fact that these maps fall into disjoint classes should no longer be surprise. It's the same idea with that we met in section 2.2 and 2.3 when discussing the data vacua and instanton, and again in section 2.5.2 when discussing vortices. This time the relevant homotopy group is pi 2 S2 equals Z. Given a configuration phi, the winding number is computed by jadi ini fall into disjoint classes karena winding number-nya ya. In a sector with nu not equal 0, the gauge symmetry breaking remains SU2 to U1. The difference is that now the unbroken U1 subset SU2 change as we move around the asymptotic S2 infinite. Ketika nu-nya itu tidak sama dengan 0, ketika winding number-nya tidak sama dengan 0, gauge symmetry breaking remains SU2 to U1. Tapi perbedaannya adalah U1 yang unbroken change as we move around the asymptotic S infinite 2. Karena winding number-nya itu ya. The next step is to notice that if the Higgs field has winding nu not equal 0, then we must also turn a compensating gauge field. Sepertinya kita sudah melihat ini waktu membahas tentang electric probes. The argument is the same as the one we saw for vortex string. Suppose that we try set AI equal 0, then the covariant derivatives are simply ordinary derivatives, and asymptotically we have ini ya, covariantnya sama dengan ini. Kalau kita set AI-nya equal 0. Ini tinggal pakai spherical aja dari sini ke sini, spherical coordinate. With partial theta denotes the necessary non-vanishing variation as we move around the angular direction of the asymptotic S to infinite. The energy of the configuration will then include the term energi dari konfigurasinya akan ada term yang seperti ini. Trace partial 1 phi square. Dan nantinya dia akan jadi ini tinggal diganti ke polar coordinate dan juga Cartesian measure-nya diganti dengan spherical measure. This integral diverges linearly. We learn that if we genuinely want a finite energy excitation in which the Higgs field wins asymptotically, then we must also turn on the gauge field AI to cancel the IR asymptotically to fall off the angular gradient terms and ensure that d theta phi turn to zero as R goes to infinity. Ya intinya sama yang seperti kemarin, biar energinya itu enggak diverge, maka AI-nya ini nggak boleh diambil 0, harus diambil sesuatu yang nanti akan mengcancel divergennya di sini. We want to solve karena dia phi-nya itu adjoint, maka aksi dari covariant derivatifnya seperti itu ya. Kita mau nge-solve ini sama dengan 0. Nah, sehingga ya ini sama dengan 0. Dan kita mendapatkan ini. AI V phi. Here the first term works to cancel the fall off from partial I phi. Ini untuk mengcancel partial phi. To see this, you will need to use the fact that trace phi square itu adalah V square, and so trace phi partial I phi goes to 0 as well as the SU2 commutation relation. Karena tadi ini trace, berarti kita menghitung trace di I phi square ya. Dan nantinya di I-nya kita masukkan ini. Dengan AI-nya ini. The second term in AI does not contribute to the covariant derivative di phi. The function AI is the surviving massless U1 photon, which can be written in the gauge invariant way as mu sama dengan 1/nu trace phi mu. We can also compute the asymptotic form of the field strength. The same kind of manipulation both show that this lies in the same direction of the Lie algebra phi. Ininya sama dengan ini, dengan Fij, curly-nya sama dengan Fij. Fij kecilnya itu partial biasa dari A, apparent field strength that we may naively expected. But we see that there is an exatom that this bring a happy surprise since it contributes to the magnetic charge M of the U1 field strength. This given by, kalau kita integrating out ini harusnya B sih, magnetic field-nya. Maka nanti kita dapatkan menarik ini ya, winding number-nya ya. With nu is the winding number defined in 2.8.9. We learned that any finite energy configuration in which the Higgs field wins asymptotically necessarily carries a magnetic charge under the unbroken U1 subset SU2. This object is a soliton and goes by the name of Adhoff-Polyakov monopole. Jadi any finite energy configuration in which the Higgs field wins asymptotically necessary carries a magnetic charge under unbroken U1 subset SU2. This object is a soliton and goes by the name of the Adhoff-Polyakov monopole. The topological consideration above have led us to avoid quantized magnetic charge. However, at first glance, the single Adhoff-Polyakov monopole with nu equal 1 seems to have twice the charge required by direct Dirac quantization, since the W boson have a charge Q equal 1. But there is nothing to stop us including matter in the fundamental representation of SU2 with Q equal plus minus half, with respect to which the Adhoff-Polyakov monopole has the minimum allowed charge. Monopole solution. We have not yet solved the Higgs equation of motion with given magnetic charge. In general, no static solution are expected exist with winding no greater than 1, because magnetically charged objects typically repel each other. For this reason, we restrict attention to the configuration with winding no equal plus minus 1. Kita belum menyelesaikan yang Higgs equation of motion with the given magnetic charge. In general, no static solution are expected because magnetically charged object typically repel each other. Tidak ada static solution karena biasanya magnetically charged object itu repel each other. For this reason, we respect attention to configuration with winding nu plus minus 1. We can write an ansatz for a scalar field with winding n equal 1. Ketika phi E-nya itu sama dengan XA over R square HR, di mana HR-nya itu 0 ketika R-nya 0, dan VR ketika R-nya infinite. This is so-called Hedhoff ansatz, since the direction of the scalar field is correlated with direction XA in space. Ya, jadi dia kayak just like a Hedhoff. Ya, jadi dia kayak gini gitu. In particular, this means that SU2 gauge action on phi A and SO3 rotational symmetry on XA are locked. Ini artinya SU2 gauge action dan SO3 rotational symmetry itu terlock, so that only the diagonal combination are preserved by such configuration. Sehingga hanya diagonal combination-nya aja yang preserved. We can make a corresponding ansatz for the gauge field which preserve the same diagonal as O3. Dan kita juga bisa memberikan ansatz untuk gauge field-nya yang preserve the same diagonal as O3, dan ansatznya untuk gauge field-nya ini. We can now insert this ansatz into the equation of motion. Kita bisa insert this ansatz into equation of motion. Ini dari Euler-Lagrange aksinya ya, tinggal dimasukkan persamaan Euler-Lagrange untuk yang gauge field-nya, untuk variasi gauge field, yang ini untuk variasi yang matter field-nya. This result in coupled ordinary differential equation of for HR and KR. In general, they cannot be solved analytically, but it is not difficult to find numerical solution for the minimal Adhoff-Polyakov monopole. Jadi kalau misalkan kita masukkan phi A dan E-nya ke sini, ya mereka akan nge-solve. Ya, jadi untuk winding n plus 1, n equal 1, monopole solutionnya itu ini dan ini. PPS monopole. Something special happen when we set lambda equals 0 into 0.8.9. 2.8.9. Kalau ininya equal 0, ya dia nggak broken dong. Here the scalar potential vanishes, which means that at least classically we can pick any expectation value V for the scalar. The choice of V should be thought as an extra information needed to define the vacuum of the theory. In quantum theory, one typically expect to generate a potential phi. The exception to this is in supersymmetric theories, where cancellation ensures that quantum potential also vanishes. Indeed, the monopole that we described below have nice interplay with supersymmetry, although this beyond the scope of these lectures. Jadi ketika lambdanya 0, maka potensialnya vanish, sehingga secara klasik kita dapat memilih any expectation value V for the scalar. The choice of V ya intinya itu. Ketika lambdanya 0, kita bisa memilih sembarang expectation value. When the potential vanish, it is possible to use the Poco-Molny trick to rewrite the energy functional. In terms of non-abelian magnetic field Pi, call ini, the energy of static configuration with vanishing electric field is energinya sama dengan ini trace magnetic field square-nya ditambah dengan kinetic term-nya. Oh, ini kita sudah pernah melakukan ya. Somehow kita completing the square. Dan dia akan lebih dari sama dengan 2 kali trace ini. Karena ini selalu positif ya. Where to get the last line, we have discarded the positive definite term and integrated by parts, invoking the Bianchi identity di Pi equals 0. Oh ya, jadi ini kita bisa taruh di luar. Dan menggunakan ini sama dengan 0, maka nanti dapat ini. We recognize the final expression as the magnetic charge. We find that the energy of configuration is bounded by magnetic charge ini. Nah, jadi ini itu adalah magnetic charge. Dan energi konfigurasinya itu bounded by ini. Dan ini sama dengan Vm ya. A configuration which saturates this bound is guaranteed to solve the full equation of motion. This is achieved if we solve the first order Poco-Molny equation, Pi equal plus minus di phi. With the plus minus sign correspond to monopoles with m greater than 0 and anti-monopoles with m less than 0 respectively. It can be checked that the solution to 2.94 to indeed solve the full equation of motion 2.92 when lambda equals 0. Jadi bisa dicek bahwa solusi dari 294 itu memang menyelesaikan full equation of motion 2.9.2 ketika lambdanya 0. 2.9.2 ketika lambdanya 0 ini ya. Solution to 2.9.4 have a number of interesting properties. First, it turns out that the equation of motion for a single monopole have a simple analytic solution. Jadi untuk single monopole kita punya solusinya simple, yaitu HR-nya VR cot hyperbolicus dan KR-nya VR sin hyperbolicus V. This was first discovered by Prasad and Sommerfeld. In general, solution to 2.9.4 are referred to as PPS monopoles with Bogomolny names added as well. Ya, dia disebut dengan Bogomolny monopoles. Enggak, PPS monopole, di mana PPS-nya stand for Bogomolny, Prasad, and Sommerfeld. A warning on terminology, the PPS monopole have rather special properties in the context of supersymmetric theories where they live in short multiples of the supersymmetric algebra. The term PPS has since been co-opted and they stay much more likely to refer some kind of protected object in supersymmetry. Often that has nothing to do with monopole. Ya, jadi ada juga term PPS yang digunakan di supersymmetric teori yang nggak ada hubungannya dengan monopole. The Bogomolny equation 2.9.4 also have solution corresponding to monopoles with higher magnetic charge. The solution includes configuration that look like far separated single charge monopoles. This is mildly surprising. Our earlier intuition told us that such solutions should not exist because the repulsive force between magnetically charged particles would ensure that energy could be lowered by moving them further apart. Jadi Bogomolny equation juga punya solusi yang terkoresponding to monopole dengan higher magnetic charge. Dan solusinya itu termasuk konfigurasi yang dengan single charge monopole yang far separated. Ini cukup mengejutkan karena intuisi awal kita memberitahu bahwa solusi seperti itu tidak ada karena repulsive force between magnetically charged particle would ensure that the energy could be lowered by moving them further apart. Ya, karena dia saling menjauh, energinya jadi berkurang, energi totalnya. That intuition breaks down in Bogomolny limit because we have a new massless particle, the scalar phi, and this gives rise to compensating attractive force between monopole. Oh, jadi karena ada scalar phi, maka ada tambahan attractive force, in which precisely cancel the magnetic repulsion. You can learn much more about the properties of the solution and the role they play in supersymmetric theories in lecture on soliton. Jadi hal seperti ini dibahas lebih lanjut di soliton. Monopoles in other gauge groups. It is fairly straightforward to extend the discussion above the other gauge group G. We can couple a scalar field phi in the adjoint representation and give it an expectation value that breaks G to H, where H equal U1R, with R is the rank of the gauge group. Jadi kita bisa, karena tadi kita pakai SU2 ya, maka kita bisa extend the discussion above to other gauge group G. Kita couple a scalar field phi in the adjoint representation and give it an expectation value that breaks G to H, where H equal U1R, with R is the rank of the gauge group. Given an expectation value for phi, we can always rotate it by acting with G. However, by definition, H leaves the scalar untouched, which means that in configuration are now classified by maps from S infinite into the space G over H. In our previous discussion, we had GH SU2 U1 S squared S2 which coincide with what we found in 2.8.8. Jadi ketika diberikan sebuah expectation value for phi, kita selalu bisa merotasinya dengan mengaksikan dengan G. Where by definition, H leaves the scalar untouched, which mean that in configuration, H-nya itu leaves the scalar untouched, which mean that in configuration now classified by map S to infinite into space G modulo H, karena H-nya nggak ngapa-ngapain gitu. As a result, in homotopy theory tells us that for simply connected G, untuk yang gauge group yang simply connected, maka pi 2 G over H itu equal pi 1 H equal ZR. We learn the 't-Hooft Polyakov monopoles are labeled by an r-dimensional magnetic charge vector M. Disagree with our analysis of 't-Hooft lines in section 2.9. A closer look reveals that 't-Hooft Polyakov monopoles have magnetic charge M in 2 pi lambda core G as recorded by the GNO quantization 2.8.0. The Witten effect gain. We saw in section 1.2.3 that in presence of theta term, a Dirac monopole picks up an electric charge. As we know shows this phenomenon known as Witten effect also occurs in the 't-Hooft Polyakov monopole. Jadi kalau ada theta term maka 't-Hooft Polyakovnya pick up an electric charge. To see this, we simply need to be careful in identifying the electric charge operator in the presence of monopole. We saw in 2.90 that the unbroken U1 is determined by phi. The corresponding global transformation is but we already did the hard work and compute the nodal charge Q associated to the such gauge transformation in 2.30. Ya, intinya kita sudah pernah menghitungnya. Dan nodal charge yang associated by gauge transformation-nya ini. In our earlier discussion around equation 2.30, we were working in the vacuum and could discard the contribution from theta. However, in the presence of a monopole, both terms contribute. The total electric charge Q is now yang ini dari kontribusi suku ini, yang ini kontribusi ini, yang Q-nya didefinisikan sebagai ini dan M-nya didefinisikan sebagai ini. We see that the theta term does indeed turn the monopole into a dion. Jadi memang theta termnya mengubah monopolnya jadi dion. Dion itu ya dia punya electric charge dan magnetic charge. This agrees with our previous discussion of the Witten effect, with the similarly different factor of 2 arising because, as explained above, Q is quantized in unit of half in the non-abelian gauge theory. Ya intinya kalau ada kita kasih dia theta term maka monopolnya picks up an electric charge. Further reading. Ini akhir dari pembahasan kita tentang monopol ya. Ya intinya nggak jauh beda sih. Maksudnya ya kita sudah membahas ini beberapa kali. Intinya kalau untuk yang non-abelian gauge theory, ketika kita memilih rag matter content, maka magnetic monopolesnya come along for free. Dan kita bisa mengganti G-nya sesuka kita. Maksudnya ya kita bisa memilih other gauge group. Dan untuk simply connected G, maka homotopy grupnya nanti ZR. Further reading, Trinity College, Cambridge boasts many great scientific achievements. The discovery of Young-Mills theory is not among the most celebrated. Nonetheless, in January 1954, a graduate student at Trinity named Ronald Shaw wrote down that we now refer to the Young-Mills equation. Jadi di Cambridge sebenarnya sudah Ronald Shaw itu sudah menuliskan Young-Mills equation. Tapi where did the theory describe massless particle? which appeared to have no place in nature, Shaw was convinced by his supervisor Abdus Salam that the result was not worth publishing. It appears only as a chapter of his thesis. Across the Atlantic, Brookhaven National Laboratory, two of his mates did not make the same mistake. Channing Young and Robert Mills constructed the equation which now bear the name Young-Mills equation. It seems likely that they got the result slightly before Shaw, although the paper only appeared afterwards. Their original motivation now seems somewhat misguided. Their paper suggests that global symmetries of quantum field theory, especially SU2 isospin, are not consistent with locality. They write, it seems that this global symmetry is not consistent with the localized field concept that underlies the usual physical theories. From this likely shaky start, one of the greatest discoveries of 20th century physics emerged. In those early days, the role played by Young-Mills theory was, to say at least, confusing. Young gave a famous seminar in Princeton, in which Pauli complained so forcefully about the existence of massless particle that Young refused to go on with the talk and had the coaxed back in the blackboard by Oppenheimer. Pauli had a head start here. In 1953, he did a Kaluza-Klein reduction on S3, realizing an SU2 gauge theory but discarding it because the massless particle. A similar result had been obtained earlier by Klein. Ya karena waktu itu strong theory itu digambarkan dia mediatornya itu nggak massless ya, tapi bermassa, sehingga makanya range dari force-nya itu rendah. Yang saya tahu itu. It took a decade to realize that the gauge boson could get a mass from Higgs mechanism, and further decade to realize that the massless particle were never really there anyway. Oh, ini ngomongin SU2 nih, bukan QCD. Dan ya, tapi intinya itulah. Maksudnya waktu itu tuh mereka tahu kalau gauge bosonnya itu atau mediatornya itu bermassa, sedangkan yang biasanya awalnya kan nggak bermassa, tapi nanti dia bisa mempunyai massa dari Higgs mechanism. And further, decade to realize that the massless particle were never really there anyway. They are an artifact of the classical theory and gain a mass automatically when h bar not equal 0. Below is a broad brush description of this theory, a collection of reminiscent 50 years of Young-Mills contain article by a number of major characters in this story. Asymptotic freedom. As the 1970s began, quantum field theory was not in fashion. Fundamental laws of physics written in language of field theory. Language in literature unloved and uncited. The cool kids was playing with bootstrap. Ya, waktu itu ada bootstrap ya. The discovery of asymptotic freedom was one of the first results that brought field theory firmly into mainstream. The discovery has its origins in the deep inelastic scattering experiments performed in slug in the late 1960s. Jorgen and subsequently Feynman realized that the experiment could be interpreted in terms of the momentum distribution of constituent of proton, but this interpretation held only interaction between this constituent becomes interactively weak at high energy. Feynman referred to the constituent as partons rather than quark. Ini sampai sekarang masih dipakai juga. Jadi parton itu ya konstituen dari proton. It is unclear whether this was because he wanted to allow for the possibility of other constituents, say gluon, or simply because he wanted to antagonize Gell-Mann. In Princeton, David Gross set out to show that no field theory could exhibit asymptotic freedom. Having ruled out field theories based on scalar and fermion, all that was left was Young-Mills. He attacked this problem with his new graduate student Frank Wilczek. The minus sign took some getting right, but by April 1973, ini minus sign yang dari beta running coupling constant ya. Kalau dia minus kan berarti dia nanti ketika scale-nya tinggi berarti coupling constantnya rendah. Atau berarti dia asymptotic freedom. The result is that they had an asymptotically free theory on their hand and were keenly aware of its importance. Meanwhile, in Harvard, Sidney Coleman was interested in the same problem. He asked his graduate student Eric Weinberg to do the calculation, but content that he had enough for this thesis, Eric passed it on another graduate student, David Pulitzer. Pulitzer finished his calculation at the same time as the Princeton team. In 2004, Gross, Pulitzer, and Wilczek were awarded Nobel Prize. Pulitzer Nobel lecture concerning interesting and very human account of the discovery. In fact, both American teams has been scooped. In June 1972, at the conference in Marseilles, Dutch graduate student named Gerard Edhoff sat in talk by Simanzik on slug experiment and their relation to asymptotic freedom. After the talk, Edhoff announced that Young's theory is asymptotically free. Simanzik encouraged him to publish this immediately, but like Shaw 20 years earlier, Edhoff decided against it. His concern was that Young's theory could not be relevant for the strong force because it has no mechanism for the confinement of the quark. Jadi dia ragu untuk mempublisnya karena berpikir Young's theory nggak ada hubungannya dengan strong force karena nggak ada mekanisme untuk confinement dari quark. The failure to publish didn't hurt Edhoff career. By this stage, he had already shown that Young's was renormalizable, a fact that which played a large role in bringing the theory out of obscurity. This was enough for him to be awarded his PhD. It was also enough for him to be awarded for the 1999 Nobel Prize, together with his advisor Feldman. We'll be seeing much more of the work of Edhoff later in this lecture. The analogy between asymptotic freedom and paramagnetism was made by N.K. Nielsen. Although the author gives private credit to Edhoff in these lectures, we compute the one-loop beta function using the background field method. This method was apparently introduced by, of course, Edhoff in lecture which I haven't managed to get hold of. It first appears published in a paper by Larry Abbott, now a prominent theoretical neuroscientist, and is covered by textbook by Peskin and Schröder. Ya intinya ada analogi between asymptotic freedom and paramagnetism. Confinement and mass gap. Asymptotic freedom gave a dynamical reason to believe that Young's was likely responsible for strong force. The earlier argument that quarks should have 3 color degrees of freedom meant that attention quickly focused on the gauge group SU3. But the infrared puzzle still remains. Why are the massless particle predict Young's not seen? Why are individual quarks not seen? Here things were murky. Was the SU3 gauge group broken by a scalar field, or was it broken by some internal dynamics? Or perhaps the gauge group was actually unbroken? But the flow to strong coupling does something strange. This latter possibility was mooted in a number of papers. This from Gross and Wilczek in 1973. Another possibility is that the gauge symmetry is exact. At first sight, this would appear ridiculous since it would imply existence of massless, strongly coupled vector mesons. However, in asymptotically free theories, this naive expectation may be wrong. There may be little connection between free Lagrangian and the spectrum of states. This idea was slowly adopted over subsequent years. The idea of dimensional transmutation, in which dimensionless constant combined with cutoff give a physical scale, was known in 1973 work of Coleman and Weinberg. Although they didn't work with Young's, the general mechanism removed the most obvious hurdle for a scale invariant theory to develop gap. Number of dynamical explanations were mooted for confinement, but the clearest come only in 1974. With Wilson developed of lattice gauge theory. This paper also introduced what we now call the Wilson line. We will discuss the lattice approach to confinement in some detail in section 4. The flurry of excitement surrounding this development also serves to highlight underlying confusion as some of the great scientists of the 20th century clamored to disown their best work. For example, as an immediate response of the discovery of asymptotic freedom and 6 years after his construction of electroweak theory, Stephen Weyerbeek writes, of course, this very general results will become really interesting only when we have some specific gauge model of the weak and electromagnetic interaction which can be taken seriously as a possible description of the real world. This we do not yet have. Now, to be add-on, the same year Gell-Mann offers, we do not accept theories in which quarks are real observable particles. It's not easy in physics. Semi-classical Young-Mills. In this lecture, we wish to describe the classical and semi-classical structure of Young-Mills theory, and only then turn to the quantum behavior. This is the logical way through the subject. It is not the historical way. Our understanding the classical vacuum structure of Young-Mills theory started in 1975 when Belavin, Polyakov, Schwarz, and Tupkin discovered Young-Mills instanton. Back then, Physical Review refused to entertain the name instanton, so they were referred to print as pseudoparticles. Othoff was the first to perform detailed instanton calculation, including the measure K rho that we swept under the carpet in section 2.3.3, among other things. His work clearly showed that physical observable depend on the theta angle. Motivated by this result, Jacquet and Reppe, and independently Callan, Dashan, and Cross understood that semi-classical vacuum structure of Young-Mills that we saw in section 2.2. Jacquet lectures give a very clear discussion of the theta angle and were the basis of the discussion here. Reviews covering a number of different properties of instanton can be found in that paper. The last, magnetic Young-Mills. The magnetic sector of Young-Mills theory was part of the story almost from the beginning. Monopole in SU2 gauge theories were independently described by Ethoff and Polyakov in 1974. The accession to general gauge group was given in 1977 by Goddard, Nuts, and Olive. This paper includes the general quantization condition that we met in our discussion of Ethoff line and offers some prescient suggestion that role of duality in exchanging gauge group. This name ideas their head in mathematics in Langland programs. Bogomelny tricks was introduced in 20. Prasad and Somerville then solved the resulting equation of motion for the monopole, and the initial PPS are now engraved on all manner supersymmetric objects which have nothing to do with monopoles. A more appropriate name for PPS states would be Witten-Olive states. Finally, Witten effect was introduced in that reference. Excellent review of Ethoff-Polyakov monopoles, both with focus on the richer PPS sector, can be found in Harvey lecture notes. And Manton Stuck-Leaf books. These are also some Tassi lectures. The Nielsen-Olsen vortex was introduced in 1973. Their motivation come from string theory rather than field theory. The fact that such strings would confine magnetic monopole was pointed out by Nambu, and the idea that this is a useful analogy for quark confinement, viewed in dual variable, was made some years later by Mandelstam and Ethoff. The Ethoff line as a magnetic probe of gauge theory was introduced in 103. This paper also emphasizes the importance of the global structure of the gauge group. A more modern perspective on line operator was given by Kapustin. A very clear discussion of the electric and magnetic line operator allowed in different gauge groups, and the way this ties in with the theta angle can be found in 4. Toward the end of 1970s, attention began to focus on more general question of the phases of non-abelian gauge theory. The distinction or lack thereof between Higgs and confining phases when matter transformed in the fundamental of the gauge group was discussed by Fredkin and Schenkers, and by Banks and Rabinovici, but really heavily in the lattice, the Banks-Sachs fixed point, and its application for the conformal window was pointed out somewhat later in 1982. Ya, jadi yang kita omongin ini, yang di bab ini paling modern, discovered in 1982. Ya, habis itu kebanyakan ngomonginnya tentang string theory atau yang lain. Ya, memang gauge theory ini kalau bukan yang supersymmetric ya sekitar tahun 70-an dan ya 70-an sih. Ya, I think that's the story of gauge theory. Historical story of gauge theory. In the next session, we will talk about new chapter there is anomalies.
Okay, good.